Generation of public debt that includes external debt. This is also the same situation of the Alberto-Cristina regime with that of Milei. The recent previous Alberto-Cristina regime will inevitably be superior to Milei's because the regime tries to change, it is disrupted. If it is cut, all the variables will change, inevitably. Now, when you see the report from the Argentine Catholic University UCA, which reports that poverty with Milei is worse than that of 2004. Actually, thanks to Gustavo, who told Christian. Thanks, Gustavo. We are going through the fourth debt crisis. Fourth debt crisis. It means that it is getting worse. That is why it is worse than Cristina's first crisis, pure Kirchnerism with her husband, and then Cristina the second time, where she did the great patriotic act of putting Alberto Fernandez as president. I laugh at the 57.8% poorer poverty that the creators of the fourth debt crisis, Alberto, Guzman, Massa, Cristina Kirchner, are responsible. Obviously, however Milei's experience ends. De la Rua was the one who was hit by the debt crisis of Menemism. The next was Macri, who broke out the debt crisis of Kirchnerism. One is Milei. It was very funny reading Cristina Kirchner and Cristina point out it. What happens is that we have a shortage of dollars, and we believe in our space, that a lack of dollars and taking external loans harms the generation of dollars itself. Of course, Cristina, industrial production, disinvestment in industrial production. Nothing during Cristina period. Then the other disinvestment and zero public policy was in the energy sector. Anyone knows that the energy sector is strategic for any country in the world to grow. 2-year-olds already know it. These that are here, around me. It's a mockery of Gustavo. You already know that the provision of energy is strategic for growth, and to have balanced and healthy public accounts. Furthermore, the supply and international prices of energy caused wars around the world. Anyone knows that the provision of energy is key to any productive process. You will see in the graphs of Cristina and Matias Culfas, they corroborate the energy trends. Gas and oil production is falling, since the government of Carlos Menem. Gas recently increased its production with the Vaca Muerta field, since the government of Mauricio Macri. The provision and production of energy is the cause of fiscal deficits. Energy deficits are the cause of dollar shortages that are replaced with imports in dollars, that Cristina does not know why the dollars are missing. The energy deficit is one of the causes of dollar shortages. Part of the same dollar shortages is due to the imbalance in the trade balance of the automotive industry. Another part of the dollar deficit is due to the structural stagnation of the industrial sector, since Menemism. Cristina, with respect to her first years of government of a total of 12.5 years, is included as one of industrialization, without external debt and twin fiscal surpluses. Yes, it would be, if you had a reliable currency, if you did not have 3-digit inflation and you did not have a galloping fiscal deficit and an exorbitant and unmanageable financial deficit, if you had genuine external investment, a financial system and external credit. And the external trade balance would be contingent on 3 times its maximum historical value. As we see, its economic regime is deficient and unbalanced in agricultural and livestock production, oil and gas production, automotive external trade balance, the industrial sector in general, including the external trade balance and the use and abuse of reserves and placements of debt with the central bank BCRA, to cover financial and budgetary needs of the national treasury, perpetuated by Kirchnerism and Cristina Kirchner. Cristina Kirchner continues to insist that she had 6 years of twin surpluses. Cristina never had twin surpluses, because she inherited from her husband's high accumulations of international reserves. And because Cristina herself in her public debt graphs, where Cristina wants us to believe that she incurred less public debt than Mauricio Macri. It shows us the debt of public sector agencies that is smooth and direct fiscal deficit of their governments. What there were high reserves in the BCRA and an external trade surplus. But they never exceeded $13 billion, a surplus of trade balance. Then the record was reached by Mauricio Macri of approximately $15 billion and again by Alberto Fernandez. He reached those levels for 2 years. In January 2023 they already reached 57.4% of people, the poverty level in Argentina. Worse than in 2004. Of course it is worse than in 2004, because the debt crises are getting worse. In 2002 the peso was devalued against the dollar, at least 68%, not 10.9% as the entire establishment and the IMF repeat. Now the devaluation of the peso was 51%. But in December 2023 it was with an annual inflation of 160%. Inflation of 160% annually worsens the data and the time to solve problems. Purchasing power also worsens the data, the value of the basic basket of products and services, etc. The quality of the liquefaction of public spending, prices and wages in pain was the country was in default on its foreign debt, liquidating its fiscal and financial deficit in one fell swoop. The number of retirees and those assisted by the state was also very different. Matias Culpes talks about the paradox in him work, that Cristina had left 150,000 social plans in 2015, and that now Alberto Cristina left 1,500,000 social plans. Cristina in 2015 would have left about 3 million in universal assistance per child, plus 150,000 plans for adults. These are the shortcomings of Cristina Kirchner's regime. This is Cristina's regime and Kirchnerism. Relax. Cristina, can she say that she was not in some of the debt crises of the last 30 years? No, because the pattern of Cristina's sexists continues. Berto Fernandez, Martin Guzman and Sergio Massa. Can Cristina separate herself from the fact that her political and judicial needs dictated the economic course of the country from 2019 to 2023? No, those are all lies from your 33-page letter, from the politicians in your space and from the journalists who protect Cristina and her frauds. The Kirchnerism regime changed despite Mauricio Macri having spent 4 years as the executive. No, because the characteristics and patterns are maintained. Characteristics are worsened, but they are maintained. Why don't Cristina's salaries pass convertibility? There it is proven that the devaluation of the peso in 2002 was at least 68%. There it is verified mathematically. Rodolfo Taragno suggests it and I affirm it. Orlando Ferreras puts 4.6% of the annual GDP growth, from 2002 to 2015. I are going to simulate a GDP based on a real GDP drop of 68%, so that you can observe the data that Cristina puts in her debt graphs, with respect to her years in the executive and the GDP achieved. You will see the level of GDP that is reached, starting from the 68% drop in GDP due to the devaluation of the peso, and starting from the 10.9% drop in GDP in 2003, as seen in Orlando Ferreira's graphs. That 10.9% drop in GDP in 2003 was agreed upon by all the Argentine media and the IMF also recognizes it on its website. Which is false, totally false. Gustavo explains it in a CTD video. Constant of Cristina Kirchner's period was to intervene INDEC to falsify statistics, inflation, employment, poverty and delay the dollar to favor the valuation of GDP and growth rate. If you compare the GDP per capita, which rises 50% more than the convertibility levels, and wages that are below convertibility at its best level, therefore, this is decisive to denote that there is an inconsistency between the GDPs. GDP per capita and wages. There is an important fact, which says that 53.4% reached the wage bill in its relationship with the total GDP. Cristina shows it as a redundant achievement of her model. If we would have the correct productive investments in Vaca Muerta, if we manage to produce oil and gas to cover the total energy needs of the country, we will be able to observe that this participation of salaries due to the multiplier effect of the same extraction, production, refining, packaging, sales, etc. in addition to qualified labor and intensive extensive technology, it will be that the percentage of participation of salaries in total wealth or GDP will decrease, and the country is going to be richer. On April 4th, Cristina Kirchner will be sentenced by the second judicial instance, with which she is going to enter into the confirmation of her sentence. Cristina is going to enter a sentencing regime. She is entering the regime of her second sentence. The girl. Second sentence tells us that Cristina's disability to administer public affairs will be perpetuated. It is clear that Cristina has a disability to manage public affairs. Cristina Kirchner and Javier Milei on X, Elon Musk's platform. Of course, just Elon Musk, Pope Francis, Javier Milei and Lali Esposito. Cristina Kirchner is missing, obviously, they left Cristina Kirchner out. Cristina, just like on March 1, 2022, returned with the message for Ukraine. They are telling me, Cristina Kirchner, Daniel Scioli and Javier Milei, let's go for Gustavo. But sneakily due to the stalemate in the war between Russia and Ukraine. Cristina explains the entire plan of the Curia with Milei. Cristina Kirchner and Javier Milei become friends. Pope Francis and Javier Milei. Milei is a clown. The clown learned well from Carlos Menem and Cristina Kirchner. 2 populists. Milei learned well from the Peronists. That is why Milei first simulated his enmity with Pope Francis, and then, following the wishes of Washington and the cast, he suddenly changed his attitude. Yes, Milei is an interesting clown, says Gustavo. Gustavo, I already told you. In the video, the alliance between Cristina and Fixed Pine. It took 4 years for the owners, Claren, Macri, the CIA and Cristina, to put in the clown, Milei. Our job is to ensure that all the clowns and useless people, which are you, end up in prison. Everything the CIA does about my body is included. Milei made retirees and pensioners pay their monthly income alone. That is, the state, between the SIPA and the national budget, all future assets, including increases, for the month of May 2024 will be saved. Retirees from March 2024 to May 2024, and when they pay in May with the adjustment that the calculation will grant, through SIPA collection. This asset is paid only by the mandatory savings suffered by retirees. Nothing will come out of the state, and the executive branch will keep a part, more than half of the inflation, to reduce the fiscal deficit. They are old, with the health problems that older people entail. With the fall in their living standards, the risks to their health are greater. Milei, did you teach retirees what the financial cycle is like? Do retirees pay their pensions themselves and give you savings? Well, I congratulate you. That is called usury anywhere in the world. Now, I am the janitor of heaven and you are the janitor of hell. Of the criminals of Argentina, Mauricio Macri and Cristina Kirchner, Claren, Peronism, Trump's crimes and the CIA. Like you are the concierge of Argentina's criminals. Manage their crimes. We are looking at Burgueño's article, that the Argentine GDP had reached $639 billion in 2023. With a GDP per capita of $12,249 in 2020, the 2021 GDP would reach $450,000 million, with a 2022 and 2023 GDP rate of 5% and negatives 4.5% respectively. The difference with respect to 2021 would be just more 0.5% of the 2021 GDP, so about $452,750 million, so the 2023 GDP per capita of this falls. Burgueño is an accomplice of the Argentine political and economic system, which is now committed to killing retirees. The only useless people in the world who give funerals with honors are corrupt heads of state like Nestor Kirchner. Milei, where do you want me to give you a funeral with honors? At least send the address of where the funeral will be held. Thief, I knew you were a thief. There is also this girl and the one who wrote the article, Manuel Tarracone, the nonsense he wrote. The fashion is to say this: distinguish between the primary fiscal deficit and the financial deficit. The $220 billion of public debt generated by Alberto, Cristina, Guzman and Massa. So that everyone understands, they falsify the data, so that the public does not know the truth. It is already very obvious. If everyone repeats the mistakes, it means that it is to cover up the fraud. But this 2023 fashion does not correspond to 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008. There, it is clearly seen how the Kirchnerist regime is degraded. How it degrades, because they cause the fiscal deficit that is consistent with monetary emission and inflation. Mr. Tarracone, obvious that in the government of Nestor and the two of Cristina there was inflation. Obviously there was inflation, the regime is degrading. They do not have a financial deficit, because they do not have to pay debts. Remember the debt write-offs and non-recognition of debts in 2005. They cover the fiscal deficit with monetary emission and inflation. There was also the idea, as everyone repeats, that the inflation tax was good for economic growth. But they generated more inflation, more fiscal deficit, more financing needs to cover and no genuine investments in hard currency. Especially in energy, a threshold in 2010 that lacked energy for the country. Then from there, and the installation of the CEPO, they begin with central bank debt placements, to finance the needs of the Treasury. Supplanting rollover with external financing. There, the financial deficit appears, with a primary fiscal deficit, not before. Milei is able to ask Cristina Kirchner. Cristina made $220 billion of public debt over 4 years. Do you want Cristina to add 100 billion more public debt to pass the responsibility onto the caste that includes retirees and those who receive social plans? No, all retirees and those who have social plans, which are linked to Social Security that represent 70% of state spending. Criminal and ethical responsibility lies with Argentine public officials. From Cristina Kirchner, through Macri, Milei, and the Argentine media.